let's turn to our real experts. To quickly introduce them, we have Mr. Jason Bailey, the founder of Green NFTs, who will answer questions around all things NFTs. We have Dr. Dirk Boll, Christie's EMEA president, who will provide the auction house's perspective on NFTs. Mr. Anatoly Crachilov, a founding partner and CEO at Nickel Digital Asset Management, will demystify the world of cryptocurrencies for us. Then we have Ms. Emily Gould, a researcher at the Institute of Art and Law, who will explore some legal issues around ownership and copyright. And finally, Rakhi Talwar, founder of Rakhi Talwar Compliance, who will address the compliance issues that arise when trading NFTs and using cryptocurrency to buy and sell art. Just some housekeeping rules. We'd like this webinar we'd like to keep to the hour. So if you could all mute yourselves and type your questions in the chat box, and then we'll take them all at once at the end. And with that, Jason, let's begin. In the simplest possible terms, can you please explain to us what is an NFT?
Yeah, so I think at the highest level, the way I like to explain this is to reference Bitcoin. So even if you don't really know what Bitcoin is, I think at this point, most people have at least heard of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin proved that you could have a digital currency that had no physical manifestation, that proved that there was a scarcity. So a limited number of these things that exist digitally, but also proved digital ownership. So that came out, 15, 16 years ago. And artists, digital artists in particular, started looking at Bitcoin and thinking, we've struggled because with digital art, people think, well, I can download the image, I can right click it and just save it or screenshot it. So there wasn't much of an economy for digital art. And they thought, well, what if you could use the properties of Bitcoin for digital art and prove that there are only so many editions of the digital artwork and prove that it's provably ownable, based on the blockchain. So that's like the highest level description of an NFT. And obviously now it's kind of exploding.
So if I'm buying an NFT, what is it that I'm buying? Am I buying a token? Do I own the token or the JPEG or both?
Yep. So I struggled with this in the beginning. I've been in this for like 4 years, and I kept telling everyone, like, I'm buying art, I'm buying art. And like the purists were like, no, what you're getting is a token. And they're right. So you're buying a token. The thing that you can actually sell, trade, destroy, right? The thing that's provably rare is a token. And traditionally what happens is that token has a hash or a link to a decentralized storage system, which sounds fancy. It just means that you have your artwork or your image or music or a game asset, because NFTs can be a lot of different things, stored across a bunch of different computers, which makes it a little bit harder for someone to eliminate them. But the thing you own is a token. And we sometimes say that the art is what the token looks like.
So what keeps me then from going into your linked art and then downloading it, minting it in another form of NFT and uploading it on a different platform and selling it as an original?
Yeah, nothing. Just like the traditional art world, I can try to, make a fake Jackson Pollock painting and bring it to a gallery and suggest that, that it was by Jackson Pollock. But one of the nice things on the blockchain that actually helps us here is if you know a given artist's address, their unique address, and you've seen that there are artworks coming from that address, and you verify with that artist, like that's their art at their address, people that are even relatively savvy know that if there's artworks by someone like Hackatow coming from an address that isn't Hackatow's address, then that's not a Hackatow artwork, right? So there's this great way to be able to look at the immutable blockchain record and use it to sort of verify who the artists are. But new people to the space often don't know that. And, there's certainly no shortage of people trying to put up artworks by other artists and trying to scam.
So you're an artist and a collector as well. And so from an artist point of view, why would you sort of create art and sell it in form of NFTs? And then from the collector's point of view, why would you want to buy NFTs over art that you can hang on your wall and, kind of use to enhance your environment?
Sure. So I think as an artist, one of the nicest things is that there's a guarantee, well, we'll get into it, but there's a 10% royalty is sort of the industry standard. So when works continue to sell, and in countries like the US, I don't think we have those royalties baked in for artists. So there's this automatic royalty that kicks in if I make a work and sell it on Super Rare, and then that collector sells it to someone else, I get 10%. If they sell to someone else, I get 10%. And that's in the smart contract, so no one has to approve that. That just automatically happens, right? Now, the quick caveat, today, if someone were then to try to resell that on a different platform like OpenSea, it wouldn't, the royalty wouldn't kick in. So that's something that we're working on. So I think as an artist, as a digital artist, the first thing is there was no, big broad market for digital art, and digital, we're all moving digital in general, right? So the number of digital artists is moving up. So I think just the fact that there's a market and that there's, the 10% royalty and that it's a fairly active market is pretty appealing. As a collector, when I started this 4 years ago, so I'm pretty familiar with the traditional art market. I don't know that I call myself an expert, but a lot of my research was about how there's not a lot of opportunity if you're born in the wrong country, and for a long time, if you were born the wrong gender or the wrong color, you really had almost no chance to make it in what we call the traditional art market, right? And what we were trying to build starting 4 years ago from the ground up is a decentralized system where artists from all around the world can have a shot, right, at getting attention and selling their work and building an economy around that. So as someone who went to art school and sort of a failed artist, early on, I was really just excited to support artists, right? And this was a way to do it for $5-10, price of a cup of coffee. And all these artists around the world would immediately like tweet me and be like, thank you so much. This is awesome. Like, thank you for supporting my work or whatever. And that's when it clicked to me that this could be the future, right? This decentralized art process. So back then it was really art's the best part of my life, and artists are traditionally sort of underfunded, and this was a way for me to help fund artists. Everyone thought I was crazy back then, and I had no dreams of a secondary market. Now, obviously, the whole world is kind of going after these early works, and I'm sitting on a couple hundred of them or whatever, but certainly wasn't anything I predicted.
Interesting. And I wanted to hear your take on the Beeple sale. Why do you think it sold for $69 million? Do you think it has something to do with the fact that it was bought and sold in cryptocurrency?
So I think if you look at the crypto markets, they had a really good year last year heading up to now, right? So we probably have more under 30 millionaires than we've ever had before. And there's only so many things you can buy and sell with cryptocurrency. And I think people are getting really excited about NFTs, and Christie's does a great job of drawing attention, to their sales and marketing and things like that. So I think, obviously you need to have people with the money that can afford to spend it, and you need a fair amount of hype and advertising. So I think it was just good timing. And, I do think it's a bit of an outlier. It's been getting a lot of attention. And for people that are new to this, I think they over assume that the Beeple sale is like the standard thing that's going on in NFTs. And it's by no means, it's the same way. It would be like thinking that Salvatore Mundi is how the standard auction works, right? It's not really that standard. The exciting and interesting thing for me is that there's sort of this cottage industry of ground up people from all, from the ground up, people all around the world have this new opportunity to kind of tap into this new market.
It is said that cryptocurrency and NFTs are bad for the environment. Because they consume a lot of energy, can you speak to that issue? And can you explain what's been being done to address it?
Sure, yeah. So at a high level, there's two processes that most of these run on. One's called proof of work, and one's called proof of stake. So proof of work is basically a bunch of computers, people with computers, competing to solve a math problem to win the reward for the next block on the blockchain. So because they're all competing, that uses up a lot of electricity, and that's generally very bad for the environment. Proof of stake is more built around, it's like a social consensus mechanism. So people that have a fair amount of this currency are tapped to try to figure out whether or not the next block is accurate and can win the rewards, just like with proof of work. But rather than having computers running, they operate on the assumption that most people wouldn't want to burn their own house down, right? So if you've got a bunch of this currency, you're not going to want to devalue it. And it's not just one person. They would check each block, it checks across multiple people. So it's sort of a clever way to get around the electricity consumption problem.
But does that not contravene the principle that NFTs are sort of egalitarian? So you're only allowing a few stakeholders to sort of then, approve sales. Is that?
Yeah, so it's definitely not perfect. I wouldn't say it's a few stakeholders. There's a lot of stakeholders involved, but it is a case where those who have the currency have more power. And I think I anticipate that we'll see other mechanisms as this gets more and more popular. but there are always going to be trade-offs.
Interesting. And my final question to you is, are NFTs secure? Are they prone to hacking?
Yeah, I'm not a security expert, but I'm probably one of the biggest, earliest collectors. So I've been in this for 4 years and aggressively collecting. And I've never had any issues at all with security. And people know me and they know my collection's one of the more valuable ones, right? And none of my immediate and direct friends have had any issues with it. That said, I think Nifty Gateway got hacked a week or two ago. And I think as more and more money comes into this space, there's going to be more and more incentive for people to try to find ways to sort of do nefarious activities. So I've safely collected for 4 years without issue, but I think it'll become more and more enticing for people to try to find ways to hack in.
Thanks, Jason. That's really helpful. Christine, the floor is now yours, so you can ask Dirk some questions around the auction house's perspective.
And Dirk, thank you very much for being with us today. As mentioned by Azmina, you are president of Christie's EMEA. And in the next 10 minutes, I'm hoping that you can help us understand why Christie's came to arrange the Beeple sale, and how do you see the future of NFT in the art world and at Christie's. So first, could you walk us through what brought this Beeple sales to Christie's calendar?
Well, when you read the papers, it looks like a one-off and a very kind of seasonal piece. De facto, it is the outcome of a development that started some 3.5 years ago. As usually with this type of a development, amongst a group of much younger colleagues who are following the digital world. Within Christie's, we were looking at digitizing our distribution structures and the administration of our company and our budgets. And so at some point we asked ourselves, what about the content? And we were setting up a little project group. We were starting with an educational program. We had 3 art and tech conferences, the first on blockchain, the second on AI, third now on NFT. We started to look into using blockchain to document auctions, and we offer that to our clients. We started in autumn 2018 in New York, and you can obtain it here in London since spring 2019. So in a sense, there was a whole development, and that led to the offer at auction of the first artwork created by AI, also in the autumn of 2018. So you can see it as a development. We saw the opportunity. We did an assessment. Our art specialist colleagues looked at the landscape and decided to dare.
And were you surprised by the outcome, or did you expect such a results?
Well, let's put it that way. We thought there is a huge community out there we wanted to tap into, and we had no idea how actually large it was and is. Secondly, we were thinking and hoping that our cutting-edge contemporary art collectors are so interested in tomorrow's next idea, next thoughts, that they would be interested in it, and we were thinking that the overlap of these two groups would be addressed by that auction. I have to admit, we might have slightly overestimated the traditional collectors group, but certainly we have massively underestimated the tech crowd out there. So the auction saw more than 150 live bids. So these were people who were committing to buy the artwork. And as you know, at auction, the most exciting moments are the last seconds before the hammer falls or the timed auction closes. And with the Beeple lot, this auction was viewed online by 22 million people, one of the biggest online-only events the world had ever seen. So we were clearly surprised by that. We were also surprised by the price. I think the price is connected to the fact that for the first time ever we accepted crypto. And what we could see when we opened the auction, it was a time-based auction, an online-only model. In the small print, you could read that the hammer price would be accepted in crypto, but the Christie's fees, the commission, as well as the tax needed to be paid in dollars. US dollars. And halfway through, we realized two things. One, that actually accepting our fees in crypto might further increase the price. And actually, when you have a contract with a consignor, with an owner who wants to sell something, part of the contract is that the auction house does everything to fetch the highest price. So at some point, realizing the situation, we felt it was our obligation to do that. And secondly, what we realized that the wider scene also saw that as a Christie's commitment. And when you look at how the bids came in, and this is the level of price of bids, but also the number of viewers, the number of bidders, you see a big step around halfway when we announced that we would actually accept the full price in crypto, and this is how it was paid actually.
Oh wow! So does it mean that you are going to have more auctions for which you will accept cryptocurrencies going forward?
Well, let's turn that around. We will certainly have more NFT-based works offered at auction to begin with. And then the question is, since Christie's is not a currency exchange, we can only accept what we can pay out to the vendor. This was easy with Beeple because he was accepting crypto and he actually wanted crypto, obviously. And we could do that for an NFT-based work. And now that we've done it with a Beeple lot, we would consider to accept our fees in crypto as well. It's a bit more complicated when you have a consignor who's not interested in crypto, even if we offer an NFT. So if the consignor wanted dollars, then we would not accept crypto. As I said, we are not a currency exchange. But on the other hand, if a consignor of an item, of an analog artwork comes to us and says, I want to sell my Van Gogh and I'm happy to have crypto in return, we might consider that. Our experience in the past weeks has been that analog collectors are a bit less open to be paid in crypto, but it's not impossible. The question then is how do you hedge it, because it's so volatile, and we saw it when we changed back our or at least part of our commission into dollars, because we do our bookkeeping in dollars, how volatile it really was. And thankfully we have a young accountant who's really interested in that whole world, who really met the perfect moment to change back.
So if you're considering doing NFTs, both from what I understood from what you said, for digital artwork and for analog artwork, as you said, and if you are willing to accept crypto, I mean, can we expect that in the future, Christie's may have its own NFT trading platform?
Well, this is certainly something we are looking into. It is a huge field, as you are all well aware. There is a lot of risk assessment. Our compliance department is doing overtime, because it's also that you're dealing with an entirely different public. Because in a traditional business like ours, I would say 60–70% are returning clients. So you have to restructure the whole process. How do you do your due diligence? Last but not least, what about the warranty? Because as you know, the artwork is the token, but what happens to the artwork information that is in a wallet? What happens to that third-party platform if the platform goes broke, or I don't know, the platform owner decides to do something with it? So that's a complicated thing. It might well be that art market players decide to mint their own works at some point, but this is more a primary market tool, so we shall have to see. But we are looking in all of that, and it's very exciting. You can feel it within the company, that people are excited about that new opportunity, that new artistic medium.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, NFTs have definitely taken the art world by, I mean, the excitement is palpable, that's for sure. Well, Dirk, thank you so much. I mean, I have many more questions, but unfortunately we have to move on, and you're staying with us for the Q&A, so definitely
I will be staying with you. Thank you for inviting me, Christine.
Sure, a pleasure always. Anatoly, I'm delighted that you can join us today. Because I think it's very difficult to understand the NFT phenomena without understanding the role of crypto. I'm hoping that you can bring some light on this. So Anatoly, you're a founding partner and CEO at Nickel Digital Asset Management. And Nickel is an investment fund that is regulated by the UK regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA. And in some ways, you kind of are a gateway between the crypto world and the real financial, the financial world, the regulated financial
traditional one. Put it this way.
The traditional one. Thank you. Thank you. So I think you're the perfect person to tell us about this crypto world and cryptocurrencies and potentially how it may have played a role in the sale of the rise of NFT. So first, could you please tell us what are cryptocurrencies and how they're different from traditional currencies?
Sure. First of all, this is, the way I see it, a non-discretionary asset with unique monetary policy. And I'm going to unfold that. I actually very often warn my clients not to look at crypto space as cryptocurrency, a term very usually used in a conversation about crypto. But cryptocurrency per se can be a bit misleading, because when you talk about currency, you expect this to be an efficient mean of exchange. And I can tell you, Bitcoin, for example, is not a very efficient mean of exchange, because with the limited number of transactions, which is roughly 7 transactions per second, it falls well behind Visa International, a very old technology of 1970s, which can transact at 56,000 transactions per second. So from that perspective, Bitcoin is not efficient, but it doesn't have to be, because there is a completely different value proposition. And here it comes that it's a non-discretionary asset, which means nobody has the right to mess around with the way it is issued. The number of coins is limited, as we know, 21 million in case of Bitcoin. And there is a very precise issuance schedule. Now, why people would bother over owning this asset is really a hedge against inflation and hedge against monetary debasement, because that's where the striking difference comes with traditional fiat systems, fiat being US dollar and euro, for example. Because I can tell you how many Bitcoins going to be in circulation, say, in March 2038. Can you tell me how many dollars going to be in circulation in the same March 2038? The answer is no way, because there is one entity called Federal Reserve System, which has full discretion as to how many dollars will be issued. And this schedule is not agreed with any one of us and will never be, because that's how fiat is designed. And if you look on the last year, 2020, the number of dollars in circulation measured by M2 monetary aggregate went up 28%, which means roughly 1/5 of all dollars out there have been created over the last 12 months. And that calls the question, how isn't it a currency debasement? And of course it is. That's why cryptocurrencies having a very transparent issuance schedule and limited capped supply creates this counterbalance to that, offering greater stability to which is kind of contrasting to the fiat currencies. Does that make sense?
But that's, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But that's for Bitcoin. And as we know, Christie's accepted Ether. So is Ether a bit different from Bitcoin? And if yes, what are the difference between the two?
Absolutely. They can coexist, and they serve completely different value propositions, if you will. Bitcoin is really came to be perceived by society as digital gold, because similarly to gold, it has element of scarcity coming with a limited number of coins ever to be in existence, similarly to what we find in traditional gold. And Ethereum, on the other hand, has not per se limited number of coins ever to be issued. There is uncapped supply, and system issues these coins as and when needed, depending on the activity in the underlying network, which is perfectly fine, but elements of scarcity is lost. From that perspective, it wouldn't qualify for store of value, but it qualifies for different, perhaps even more important function, which is the smart contract implementation, upon which you can build a number of various implementations, so-called decentralized applications, which are running on rails, transport rails built by Ethereum. And for that perspective, they are kind of very different value propositions, can perfectly coexist. You can have a number of other competing protocols. In addition to Ethereum, you have Cardano, Polkadot, Stellar, Solana. Question, why so many? And the answer is, in this world, you are facing so-called scalability trilemma. The logic being, you have to optimize between three very important components. One of them being decentralization, and all cryptocurrencies are built around decentralization. Second, scalability. How many transactions per second can you do? Is it 7? Is it 57,000? And so on. And the third one is security, right? Because in the world, when you don't have a centralized authority which controls this currency, and essentially it runs on these in a decentralized manner, how do you make sure that this system is resilient to external attacks? And as Jason was mentioning, when people are aware of your balance or artwork you own, there are going to be some malicious players who would like to get access to that, right? And it's all transparent. But blockchain is transparent. So security is not a trivial thing here, and you have to optimize the whole system to perform perfectly in a sustainable manner over a protected period of time. Bitcoin, for example, has been around for 12 years, and it was never successfully hacked. And that's unique, kind of you create a software which is so resilient. Now, there are a number of instances of hacking attacks and loss of asset, but this is a second layer when kind of how do you as an end user hold your private key? And if this is compromised, somebody get hold of your private key, you lose your asset. But in this triangulation, as I mentioned, scalability trilemma, you have to choose 2 out of 3. You cannot ever optimize for all 3, right? And some protocols are saying, hey, for us, decentralization is so paramount and security. We're prepared to sacrifice the scalability. And Bitcoin is one of those, not very efficient on scalability side. Ethereum, as a matter of fact, also falls in this category, but Ethereum came up with the brilliant so-called layer 2 enhancers, which allow now to process much wider number of transactions beyond the limited, whatever 15 Ethereum had at the origin. So basically, each protocol is trying to optimize across this triangle, and that gives birth to a number of parallel systems, all competing for the place under the sun. But Ethereum and Bitcoin today, the 2 largest, they jointly account for 75% market cap of the entire crypto market, which has 8,000 crypto assets out there.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. Now, as Dirk told us, there are many new billionaires or millionaires in cryptocurrency. And as, you know, could you tell us a little bit how easy it is to go from fiat currency, dollars, euro, etc., into cryptocurrency, and then to come back from crypto to regular fiat currency?
Sure. In fact, it's extremely easy. It doesn't sound that easy for the external observer, but for professional players like us who kind of live in this space, transitioning from fiat into crypto and back happens multiple times a day. We are trading anything between 8,000 and 12,000 trade lines a day, and many of them are involving transition between these 2 kind of places, fiat and crypto. And yet, generally, it's far more difficult for retail investors to transition. And I really see this more regulatory issue, because regulator trying to kind of safeguard retail clients from dangerous world of crypto essentially creates this difficulty in transitioning. And you may see that even some of the banks like HSBC here in Britain suddenly said like, well, any gains from crypto exchanges we would not be accepting, which is ridiculous if you think, because if you KYC a client, and that's what important, you have a clean client in front of you, would that matter for you if client brings dollars or euros? Of course not. Client is a source of clean capital. why suddenly bringing Ethereum becomes a problem, and it shouldn't be. But HSBC, in their particular case, so scared of the regulatory compliance, they would not touch this space and offer another service. But
Oh, Anatoly, can you hear me?
that's only, yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
We lost you for a minute.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can
sorry.
hear you now.
So what I'm saying, as crypto is more accepted and adopted on institutional level and retail level, it will become day-to-day operation, because many banks will offer this easy transition from one to another. But even before, so last year with PayPal entering the market, to me, this is at some stage going to be called PayPal moment, because they have made transition from fiat to crypto so much easier. We don't experience this yet here in Europe, because PayPal application, European version, does not allow trading in crypto or kind of transitioning. But in the US, it's already fully functioning, and it really takes 2 clicks for you to transition from dollars into Bitcoin. And that is kind of a revolutionary new way, allowing this ease of transition, going there and back. And by the way, what PayPal does as an additional service, which is being launched now, they would allow you to spend your crypto if you want to spend one. I don't know why would you do so, but if you want to spend it on something, you can do it. And it's going to be 23 million sales point around the world, which are part of the PayPal framework. And the way it's done, you as a sales point, you don't have to adapt your accounting to accept crypto. Because what PayPal gonna do at the time, at the point of sale, they will convert Bitcoin or ETH into local currency. If we're in Britain, it's going to be sterling. In the US, it's going to be dollar. And the local sales point will get a very well recognized local currency. And then everyone is happy. As a client, you've spent crypto because you want it. Local sales got the local currency. And in between, PayPal made them 1%. Everyone is happy. But suddenly, the whole idea of going from fiat to crypto and back and paying for goods becomes everyday reality. And then comes Tesla, allowing you to buy a new Tesla using your Bitcoin, which is going to be roughly 1 Bitcoin, 1 Tesla. Maybe by the time we... yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, thank you very much, Anatoly. And I had many more questions and I would continue, but unfortunately we have to move on at this point. So, but really, really interesting. Thank you for your perspective on that market.
Thank you.
So Azmina, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Emily, all of this is raising quite a few questions in my mind around ownership, copyright, anti-money laundering regulations, and we'll hear from Rakhi in a minute around AML. But I really wanted to ask you a few questions around ownership and copyright. And my first question is, legally speaking, when you buy an NFT, what is it that you legally own, and how can buyers protect their interests when purchasing an NFT?
Yeah, really good question. And I think I'm going to go back to the very beginning of our seminar, actually. And I think Jason describes probably much more eloquently than I what it is you're getting when you buy an NFT. And really what you are getting is a unique certificate or token, if you like, which links to an asset that no one else can own. So only you can own that particular certificated version, if you like. So I've seen this isn't my invention. I've read it a few times. People making an analogy to the deeds to a house, for example. So those deeds they're not the house itself, they're not the asset, but they are your proof of ownership of that underlying asset. So at the moment, we're talking mainly about those assets being digital works of art. That's certainly what the hype has been about over the last few weeks. So when you get your NFT to that underlying asset, you are also getting certain rights to use that underlying asset. And in the main, it would be rights to display that work and to use it for your non-commercial personal use. You generally would not get any wider rights to say commercialize that work, to, you know, print t-shirts of your digital artwork and sell them, because the copyright will generally remain with the original artist. So owning an NFT does not mean owning the copyright in the underlying work.
And that's very similar to tangible art.
Exactly, exactly.
Can you speak about smart contracts? I expect they don't replace the actual terms and conditions that need to go hand in hand when buying and selling art on NFTs.
No, and I'm conscious, Azmina, I hadn't actually finished answering your first question, which is about the buyer's protection. So I will mention smart contracts in that context. So from a contractual point of view, if you are a buyer of an NFT, you do have a certain amount of confidence in your purchase that you are actually getting what you think you are getting. And that's because of, or in large part because of the way in which the whole smart contract and blockchain mechanism works, which gives you a very transparent history of all transactions in relation to that NFT, from the original minting of the NFT to your current purchase. And a lot has been spoken about the fact that this gives you really secure provenance. And, you know, provenance has been something that the art market has struggled with for centuries. And certainly for contemporary art, for new pieces, the blockchain structure can give, I think, a new level of confidence in that whole issue of provenance. So that gives you some security as a buyer. And so to come on to your next question about smart contracts, yeah, very interesting concept. So smart contracts are the mechanism by which NFTs are bought and sold on the blockchain. And in essence, they are a little piece of computer code. They're a computer program which kind of operates by a trigger and response system. So Jason mentioned the resale royalty, which you will get as a creator of a work. And that is sort of triggered automatically through the blockchain every time that NFT is bought and sold. However, your smart contract is only, as you alluded to, Azmina, is only part of the full picture, because it sits alongside and works together with text-based terms and conditions, which will be the terms and conditions of the marketplace on which you're buying and selling your NFT. So there are a number of these different marketplaces, and they set out terms and conditions which are agreed to both on the seller side and on the buyer side. And they set out the kind of legal terms which you would expect to see. So licensing terms in terms of copyright, you know, general terms about liability, about how the contract works, about termination. So those two, so you get a kind of a hybrid contract, and I'm sure there will be a lot more sort of discussion of and investigation into whether and how the smart contracts work and their legal enforceability in certain particular situations.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to when a buyer buys on via an auction house. They sign up to the auction house's terms and conditions of sale. And it sounds that there might be some considerations to keep in mind when buying and selling NFTs on NFT platforms, because they too have their unique terms and conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as anybody getting involved in this from either side, seller or buyer, you would want to, I mean, it's a very boring exercise, but you would want to familiarize yourself with the terms and conditions, particularly, you know, as a seller, because you will get different deals from the different marketplace providers. There's a certain amount of parity, but there are different, you know, different tweaks on each of those marketplaces.
That's helpful. And then from an artist's perspective, what are some of the IP considerations that artists should consider when trading their art in form of NFTs?
Sure. Well, if you are selling a work as an NFT and you're signing up to these terms and conditions, for example, one of those terms would be a warranty that you do actually own the copyright in what you're putting up there for sale, and you're not infringing anyone else's copyright in producing, displaying, selling that work. So that's, you know, that's your first consideration. And we haven't got, you know, we could have a 3-hour lecture on what those basic copyright rules are, but obviously we're not going to go into those now. But that's your kind of your first consideration. So then, assuming you are confident in that, you have your copyright, how are you going to go about protecting that in the NFT environment? And really, there's not a lot of difference to any kind of environment in which you're going to be selling, say, a digital work of art. You would protect it via two routes, really, via copyright related rules and via contractual mechanisms. From the copyright point of view, there are certain practical measures you can take. You can embed certain data within your work. You can put a copyright notice on it. In some jurisdictions, you can register your copyright, not in the UK, but in other places. That's a good thing to do. And then from a contractual point of view, you will ensure that you have in place robust licensing terms. And in lots of instances, you won't have much choice about those. You will choose a marketplace, and they will have licensing terms. But as I mentioned earlier, you would often be granting a right to a buyer to use that work, to display it for their non-commercial personal purposes, but not to commercialize it. So you don't want somebody to take your digital work, print it on a T-shirt, and set up a website selling T-shirts with your art. Your art depicted on there. So it's no kind of new magic about the ways in which you protect your rights, but just a kind of new way of thinking about them in the context of the way you're going to be buying and selling through NFTs.
And can you speak to the issue of converting tangible assets into NFTs, into digital art, and then minting it to NFTs? The Burn Banksy example comes to mind, which is a very disturbing video to watch on many, many levels. But I was just wondering if you could speak to that issue.
Sure. To me, this is in a way one of the more sort of fascinating areas, really. And I think it does raise a whole new level of complexity in a way. And so I think there are two potential scenarios here. One is probably fine, and there are ways of doing it perfectly legitimately and without causing any problems. And the other is more problematic, and that's the Banksy scenario. But the first would be where an artist makes a choice, wants to either create a new physical work and then mint it as an NFT, or take an existing work. I think Damien Hirst has recently started selling, a stock of works that he had via NFTs. So you take a work and you say, I want to get it minted as an NFT, and then you go from there. And there is no inherent reason from copyright law or any other area of law really why that can't work. You'd need to do a bit of work to make sure all the rights are in the right places and you have the right licensing terms. But yeah, as I say, no inherent reason why that should be problematic. And there are companies set up to do this. There's a company called Flipkick, I think it's called, in the US, whose business model is built around partnering with artists and taking their physical works, minting them as NFTs, and then going on with those sales. So that's potentially fine. Where we do encounter problems, though, are situations where there are pre-existing works of art, and somebody who has no connection with that artist without their consent takes that work, decides to do something with it, then mint it as an NFT and sell it, without any reference back to the artist, without any permissions in place. And the Banksy example is a perfect example of this kind of scenario. So just very briefly, in case people don't know the story, this group called Burn Banksy purchased a Banksy. It was his Morons 2006, a screen print of that work. And then they made a digital image of it. Then they promptly torched the original, burnt it, and took a video of themselves doing that. And then they sold so then they created an NFT of the digital image, and they sold that for something like $380,000. And they said that the whole object was to try and sort of transfer the value of this original screen print, the physical work, into a digital work to be sold as an NFT. So two major problems here. The first being, I very strongly suspect they didn't get a license from Banksy to do that. You can't just take someone's copyright work and make a digital image of it without their permission. That is an exclusive right for the copyright owner. And then the secondary, this is something we've not touched on at all, and it's a whole other area really, but the notion of moral rights. So artists have certain moral rights, and the important one here would be the right to prevent certain alterations and adaptations of your work which would prejudice your honor and reputation as an artist. And I think there might well be quite a decent arguable case for Banksy, should he wish to raise such a case, that torching of his original work was an infringement of those moral rights. So yeah, very interesting and very problematic area, I think, Azmina.
I have so many more questions, but I know we want to keep to time. So Rakhi and Christine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Azmina. Well, fascinating, really. But yes, we definitely could not finish today's conversation without tackling the question of regulation. Rakhi, thank you very much for being with us today. You've made a business of advising the art world on regulation. So I'm sure you're very, very busy these days with the new anti-money laundering laws that are coming into place in Europe. And so what I'd like to discuss with you is really some of the regulatory consideration that one should take into account when thinking of trading NFTs. And so first, for regulatory purpose, do you think NFTs are or should be treated as art, number one, as financial instrument, number two, or something completely different?
Really good question, and I haven't quite made my mind up on that. And actually, I'm really glad, because I'm not, I'm not a legislative policymaker, and I don't have to. But my simple way of looking at it is that an NFT is always linked to something, and I would say that it makes sense to link the regulation of NFTs to what they represent. So if it's pegged to a work of art, then I would say it, there's regulation of art at the moment. So you regulate it in the same way as you would a work of art. And if it's for a Pokemon card, then you would regulate it as you would, a collectible. So that's the way I would look at it. I don't know the answer though. I don't know how the regulators will land on this.
Well, do you think they know at this point, or do you think they're trying to figure it out?
I think it's all so new and emerging. I wouldn't want to guess, but this question sort of leads to other sort of important questions, like, for example, is digital art covered by the definition of a work of art at all? Because this is what triggers the AML obligations for the art market, at least under EU legislation. And I know that when the British Art Market Federation were drafting the guidance for the art market in Britain, it was certainly the view that digital art and video art would be covered. And the guidance acknowledges this by saying that conceptual art is covered. But the AML regulations refer to the definition of art in an old VAT Act, the 1994 VAT Act, which obviously predated the digital art phenomenon. So, there's that to be confirmed. But whichever way you look at it, I would say, any dealer selling digital NFT art would be foolish to consider that they don't need to comply with AML regulation, certainly above that, the EU threshold of 10,000 euros.
Do you expect more regulation to come in at some point?
Well, yes, I do. I certainly think, we'll get clarity, I think, along the lines of whether digital art, NFTs are art, and whether that's going to be regulated. I think there's the VAT Act regulation definition doesn't include certain certain items, such as collectibles are not included. So that sort of means that if you're selling a trading card, that's not covered. I think that we'll see that will change. So I do think regulation is going to, bring in more areas. I'm pretty sure it's only a matter of time, but how long it'll take is anybody's guess. And also the regulators are always behind the curve. It usually takes something, to go wrong before they actually start to focus on regulating an area.
And in the meantime, do you think the lack of regulation in that space, while the traditional art world is getting more and more regulated, do you think that lack of regulation could be a source of the growing of the space?
I don't know. I'm not that convinced that, you know, NFTs, the sort of the craze that's happening is being driven by the lack of regulation. I think it's a craze that's you know, come about because, you know, there are millennials and younger generations who are steeped in all things crypto, and this NFT thing is novel, and it's exciting to see artists and enthusiasts create them and make money off them. And I think, you know, NFTs have just become another crypto vehicle for speculative investment, and there's lots of profitable punting going on, and people are having lots of fun with it. And I think that's sort of creating this hype, frankly.
Well, very interesting. And Rakhi, thank you so much for this point of view. I think that's the best way to end this discussion, because I can see that it's already 4:55, and if we want to have a little bit of time for Q&A, I think we should stop it here. So
Chris Bentley has a question.
Hi. It's a slightly loaded question, but I wondered when, at what point or in how long the panel think that NFTs will start to have a stable and predictable market value in the same way as traditional artwork does. Currently, obviously, I think the NFTs are behaving like very fresh primary market artwork, insofar as there's not really a number of historical transactions to refer back to establish market value, or to try and establish market value. When does the panel believe that there may be a sort of sufficient volume of transactions to start to have more stability in market value?
Jason, I think it'd be good if you took this one.
Sure, yeah. So I think right now Ethereum and Bitcoin are pretty volatile, and nobody would deny that. And while the artworks don't go up and down in perfect sync with Ethereum and Bitcoin, the majority, 99.99% of the people that are buying these things are people that have made money on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I think we'll need to see some stability in those currencies to see stability in the market, or we'll need to see more people accepting you know, fiat currency as a method of payment, which for now, as long as the community is dominated by crypto oriented folks, there's a strong desire to keep it crypto. So hopefully that helps. It's the volatility in the currency, which is what most of the collectors have, that's going to drive the volatility in NFTs.
Yeah, I found it interesting that when you started the sale, Dirk, at Christie's, the initial valuation of the Beeple artwork was $100. Can you comment on that and why you chose $100?
That is a bit of a computer issue more than anything else. So as you know, we quite regularly have cases where we say we cannot put a value against it. And in a classic auction, you would print estimate on request, and then when requests come in, the answer to these requests will reflect the current state of the discussion. So the value that's been named will change over time. During the preview time, for example, that wasn't the case here. It's a very simple answer why it was $100. That's the lowest figure our computer system for online-only auction allows. That's all. There's no mystery behind it. It is what it is.
That makes perfect sense then. Mystery solved.
Could I, before we come to the next question, make a quick comment on the VAT question?
Of course.
Because as you know, when you buy something from the art trade or an art auction, you have to pay VAT for the service fee of the intermediary. And since the NFT-based artwork is not a physical artwork, the whole transaction is seen as a digital service. So the VAT that kicks in actually is not the VAT of the legislation of the auction place, which would be US in our case, but the legislation of the buyer, which is interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm. So
because you also don't know where it will land, so you cannot calculate in the beginning.
Yeah, but this is an information, assuming the KYC has been done, you should have pretty good information about it.
Absolutely, but you only know which VAT regime will be applicable once you know who is the highest bidder.
Indeed. Indeed.
Mhm.
Do we have another question, Azmina?
I think we have somebody. You describe yourself as iPhone, but please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question.
Oh, it's Victoria.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I want to ask a couple of questions to Dirk. How do you have a list of people who register with you to for this NFT, or did they come in completely out of the cold? How much do you know about your bidders?
Well, as Christine rightly pointed out, we do our due diligence. So we have a KYC process in place, and everybody who was admitted to bid for the paperwork had to go through that process, and our compliance team had to give green light. I have to admit that this was an entirely different risk profile we were working with or against, depending. But yes, we do have a list, and yes, those who were allowed to bid went through the KYC filter successfully.
So does the regulations regarding where the money is coming from, whether it's fiat or NFT, apply the same? I mean, when we are at auction,
yes,
as you say.
In principle, they do, but as you know, the KYC process also has an aspect of risk assessment. But the answer is yes.
So is the NFT converted to fiat at the end of the sale?
No.
So it still stays in the currency that you've accepted.
Absolutely.
The crypto. Very interesting. This is a very new stage.
It's been a first. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that? It's really interesting because the due diligence process is definitely the same and certainly not less, because I think when the regulator, certainly HMRC, view it as and the minute you accept crypto, you go into an enhanced due diligence kind of scenario, and you must understand the source of funds. And to understand the source of funds, you need to know that the money is coming from the bidder, the winning bidder. So you've got to do that enhanced due diligence to ensure that money came from that winner's crypto wallet. Just like you would do, it's easier actually to do with fiat, frankly, because you can check the bank details. But yeah, you would do all that.
Interesting, very interesting.
Any other
level of trading? No, thank you from me.
By the way, if I can add to this point, transitioning from crypto back to fiat, it's really a psychological thing at this stage, because the question is, what's your unit of account? And we are accustomed to count our wealth or anything in fiat currencies. But believe me, many people who are operating in purely in crypto live in crypto, and actually were buyers on this auction, they live pretty much in different unit of account. For them, the standard currency is ETH. Dollar is a transitioning currency. So I wouldn't be surprised if over time, both sellers and buyers would keep crypto as their part of their allocation, rather than running back to fiat safety, perceived safety. So it's only a matter of time.
I guess.
Well, my interest was actually taxation. How, if you move one to another, presumably you would various taxes to which currency or which country would apply. And I was just interested how that is going to be dealt with, if it's changed from fiat to crypto or the other way around.
That's correct.
Particularly, I think,
In most of the countries, and the US in particular, if you transition from crypto back to fiat, that is considered as a sale of asset being Ethereum. And if you bought it at 1,000 and you've sold it at 1,800, whatever is the difference, you are liable for taxes. And you may say, listen, I'm just transitioning from one currency to another. But the way legislation is built today, it's perceived as a sale of asset. Hence, some of the clients may be mindful whether they want to transition or not, because it just creates a taxable event. But again, yes, it depends from one country to another. There is different regimes.
But as a retailer, if you sell it in crypto, if you accept crypto, do you convert it to fiat for business terms? That would be considered as a capital gains, would it not? Or am I confused?
Your holding of crypto would be milliseconds, because you, as in my case with PayPal, for example, right? If you are a local shop and you have accepted crypto, PayPal immediately converted it back to fiat. So your holding period was negligible. Hence, the price differential is negligible. Hence, there is no tax really attached to that. But for people who hold fiat for long and then buy piece of art, they are likely have accumulated certain capital gain, and that may become a taxable event.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's really fascinating, and I'm sure we could.
Christine, just one question from Monin, and then we can close out.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about risk and insurance. So we have talked about the hosting of the NFT artwork on platforms and on the transfer from the original artwork to the auction house stakeholding platform, if there's such a platform, and then further transfer the artwork to the ultimate successful bidder. What can happen in the different chain of events, and how do you ensure against those chain of events? That's one. The second would be, what if systems change? The current technology, as we know, may evolve, say, in a year's time, that make the original NFT inoperable on certain systems. So how would the auction houses or galleries advise collectors to maintain that artwork? Thank you.
Dirk, I wondered if you felt comfortable addressing some of this.
I was wondering myself. Well, what I can tell you is that insurance companies are, as many of us, trying to find their feet in this process. And at the moment, the risk you're addressing is uninsurable, if that's an English word. So there is no insurance who covers that risk. This is why the disclaimers in this context, when you come to a classic market, are so huge and comparable with, I don't know, a historic car sold in an art context. Then you have to sell it like a sculpture, but not as something that moves and has an engine. So there is no insurance yet, and I'm sure it will be out soon, and might be quite expensive actually. Secondly, the question of how to deal with technology is a question where I think the artists should have a say. And what I can report is that people actually offered publicly to a winning bidder, because he did that before the auction was over, to create a representation of the work in other media. And this was, of course, thought to cater to our predominantly more conservative and object-loving client base. But he said, whilst the work will always be on NFT base, that one could think about translating it or giving it a representation as a piece on a screen, or even a printout was suggested. So I think the answer, how to deal with technological change and development, needs to be defined by the artist, or I would see that as the artist's right to do that, or to decide that.
Just to add, I think that would form part of the licensing terms. It would need to be something that was thought about up front. And you know, it's not unusual for a license to grant rights which might relate to current or future technologies.
Well, I think these were two great questions to conclude our discussion today. I mean, obviously, there are many more questions, and we really did not intend to answer all the questions today, but at least we wanted to start the conversation. So I hope that at least you have more questions in mind now about the phenomenon of NFT. The insurance question, I think, was fascinating, and I know that some of our PAIAM members are in the insurance business, so we could certainly dig more here and try to find some answers. So I'd like at this time to really thank all our panelists. I mean, this was a fascinating conversation. It was a great overview. And thank you so much for taking the time today to be here and to discuss this subject with all the PAIAM members.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the PAIAM members, if you have, if there are subjects that you want to continue to discuss, please do send an email to Hannah. We'll be delighted to continue the conversation and arrange maybe a series of events that will continue to look into this subject. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.